Today, I'm going to break down exactly how much this pool costs to build. Next, I'm going to break it down phase by phase, job by job. You're going to know just how much it costs. I think you'll be surprised.
Okay, if this is your first time seeing one of my videos, let me give you a little backstory. We didn't just build the pool by ourselves. We went through a program called DIY Pools and Spas, and they give you all the tools and the step-by-step method in order to build a pool yourself and save a lot of money. Some of my earlier videos that go through the why you want to do it, the design, and some early phases of the construction are down in the description below. There's also some affiliate links down there if you want to look at the DIY Pools and Spas program for yourself and a coupon code that can save you a lot of money. But enough of that. Let's get to what everybody wants to know. How much did this pool cost and how much did I save? So I'll be honest with you. At first, I had my doubts about whether I could balance work, family life, and still manage building a giant pool on my own. So before I made the leap, I decided to test the waters. I took the designs that DIY Pools and Spas did for me, and I sent them out to 3 different pool builders. Well, it was 2 pool builders and a general contractor. I wanted to see if, maybe it was just a couple thousand, 10,000 more. Hey, low stress, they'll take care of it. But here's the key. I didn't just ask for a price. I asked for a complete itemized quote. I didn't want just a big old number with a payment plan. I wanted to see exactly where the money was going phase by phase. So when the quotes came back, I tell you, I was pretty shocked. The first builder didn't even try. I mean, he didn't put anything to itemize. He just slapped on more than $100,000 more than the other 2 estimates. Honestly, I don't think he actually wanted the job. I think he just priced himself out of the job. The other 2 were closer to each other, but even then, they were still way higher than what I ultimately spent. And here's the kicker. One of the builders came over to my house, spent a couple hours with us, going over the design that I had. I showed him, I said I wanted exactly this. He took all the notes, he took all the designs, he went back, and what he did is he came back with a completely new design. Different shape, different features. I mean, it was ridiculous. I knew right then if I wanted the pool that I wanted, I had to stay in control of the process. So here's what I'm going to do for you. I'm going to take those 2 realistic quotes. I'm going to break them down phase by phase and show you exactly what the builders would have charged me compared to what I ultimately paid. Let's first start with the design phase. So I first attended an hour-long presentation on how the program works and if it was right for me. Links to that presentation are in the description. Eventually, we chose to join the program and I paid around $32.99 or $3,299. Yeah, it was a little cheaper back then. I think they're running a special, but we got in for about $32.99, $3,300, something like that. So basically, we went to pool school. We learned about how to start running a pool or designing a pool. And we went through the whole program. Eventually, you get to the point where you're ready to do design form. So we filled in the design form, put everything we want. But I'll tell you, I got 2 videos that you really want to watch first. They're down in the description. One of them is the design hack. Gives you a little tool on how to prepare for your design. And then actually you can go through the design phase. It gives you everything we did during the design phase. At the end of the process, I had a fully prepared engineering drawings and even a 3D video. The pool builder came to my house, spent about 2 hours pitching his drawings and left. 2 weeks later, he sent me an itemized price sheet, $12,000 up front. And that was before the engineering review. See, with his plan, they wouldn't do an engineering review. I had to pay extra. And in fact, by the time this builder would have even finished the gunite, I would have already paid him more than I spent on my entire project doing it myself. So the general contractor was going to take the plans that DIY Pools and Spas gave me and use those as the construction plans. So it was The only way I can kind of compare, those are kind of sunk costs. And if I was just to do the engineering plans, I can actually get that done over at DIY. And they do design and engineering plans for around $2,000 or $199.99, as you can see here. It's kind of a neat program. I mean, if you already have built a pool yourself, you don't need all the instructions and how to and the phases and kind of the hold your hand piece to it. You can save some money and just go right into either designing your pool or getting a custom design package. So the general contractor is going to work right off of my DIY engineering plan. So for a fair comparison, I use DIY Pools and Spas design and engineering package, which cost $1,999. All right, let's roll up where we are so far in terms of money spent. On the DIY side, I spent $3,299. If I'd have gone the contracting route, I would have spent $1,999. And if I'd gone with the traditional pool builder, I wouldn't be out of pocket for any cost yet. But you got to remember, they also don't do engineering on their plan. All right, so the dig was one of the biggest surprises for me for this build. Not just in how complicated it was, but just how much difference in cost between my build and what the contractor and what the pool company wanted to charge me for the dig. So for my pool, I hired Chewy. He's the owner of LPZ Construction. Fantastic guys, second generation builder, and I do have a video about the dig in the description that goes over all, the entire process, tips and tricks and things. But Chewy charged me $7,000 to dig the pool and set all the forms, and that pretty much included everything I need to set the foundation of the project. Now, because my soil is really sandy, they had to do something called an overdig. So in order for the process to work after the gunite phase, I had to actually pay them another $1,000 to come in and regrade all the property so it's properly sloping across the build, and we can continue with the rest of the build. So for all in digging, forming, and regrading, I had to pay $8,000. So now let's compare that with the other two quotes I got. So for the pool company, they did give me an itemized list, phase by phase, and so for excavation and forming, they wanted to charge me $26,852. And then let's go look at the contractor. The contractor was less, but he still wanted to charge me $23,550. So that's a pretty big difference of about $18,000 between the contractor pool company and my me doing it myself, and that's just moving dirt and setting forms. It's the same hole in the ground, completely different build. Next up, if you want to dive deeper into how to read the plans and understand rebar layout, check out one of my other videos called Rebar Basics. I'll link it in the description. Here's something most homeowners don't realize. The steel crews, or really all the subcontractors that you see out here, like Juan Carlos and his team, are the same guys who build the pools for the big name pool companies. Very few pool builders will have the actual tradesmen on their payrolls. They subcontract it out. The difference is I'm hiring them directly instead of paying the pool builder's markup. For the exact same work, the cost to me to do steel was $6,500. Now here's something interesting. Both the pool builder and the general contractor quoted $11,050. It's the same crews, the same steel, almost double the price. So next up is the plumbing phase, the veins and arteries of the pool. This is where all the pumps and valves and lines come together to make the system work smoothly. For labor costs, I had a plumber named Benito Perez. Benito worked for all the major pool builders. He charged me for labor $4,350. Materials for the plumbing came to $5,938. That includes pipes and fittings, valves, and pipe cement, all sorts of stuff. And then later, I paid Benito another $750 to come back in and hook up all the equipment to the pipe manifold. So, all in, materials for the plumbing came to $5,938. With the labor, that brings the total cost of plumbing to $11,038. Now, let's compare that to the pool company. The pool company wanted to charge me $13,000, and that included labor and materials. And then for the contractor, labor and materials as well, they wanted to charge me for the plumbing phase $16,000. This is all for the exact same work. I saved several $1,000s by managing labor and materials myself and hiring the subcontractor directly. And as always, this is the same professional work that the big builders rely on. You just pay the middleman when you go through them. So by cutting out the markup, you control the costs and you still get top quality results. Okay, so next up is the Gunite Phase. It's the shell of the pool, the foundation for everything else. If you want a full deep dive into this phase, check out the dedicated video down in the description. For me, I went with Corona Gunite. Corona Gunite is one of the top gunite companies in the area, and they charged me $25,750 to spray the highest quality gunite for my pool. Now, for comparison, the pool company quoted me $28,434 for the gunite, and the general contractor quoted $26,400 for the same scope job. Now, here's the key. Not all gunite's created equal. When you go through the pool company or contractor, you often don't know exactly what grade of gunite they're spraying. I was the one hiring the gunite company, which meant I was controlling the material and the quality. In fact, I actually chose the highest bidder, Corona Gunite, because they used the best quality mix in the area. That's the kind of control you get when you DIY. You know exactly what you're paying for and what you're getting. All right, so hold on because it's about to get real. These companies charge a lot of money for tile and coping. And when it came to tile and coping, I wanted function and style. So I chose travertine coping because it stays cooler in the hot Texas sun. And I went with a 6-inch tile around the water line because it's easier to clean. And it gives the pool a nice, sharp, modern look. For the two negative spillovers on my pool, I upgraded to glass tile. It captures the shimmer of the water and creates a finish that, like a travertine veneer just wouldn't match. So I sourced all these materials through my contractor's account at National Pool Tile. The coping and the tile cost me $4,806. I paid Caesar and his crew $4,000 for their labor, and they brought all the mortar and all of the grout that they needed. Altogether, the job cost me $8,806. Now, here's where the DIY approach really made a difference. The pool company wanted to charge me $16,926 just to do the waterline tile, and it doesn't actually include the travertine coping. To add the bullnose travertine, it was another $2,873. Tiling the raised beams added another $5,603, and the extra travertine, I can only imagine, is the veneer. It came in at another $6,320. So altogether, that brought their total to $31,722. Now, the general contractor's base quote for the waterline tile was $15,450, but he wanted $8,975 for the bullnose travertine coping and another $5,500 for the tiling of the raised beams. So his total cost came to $29,925. So in the end, by hiring Caesar directly and managing the process myself, I got the exact look I wanted and saved over $20,000 compared to the builder's quotes. Now, decking was one of the most challenging parts of my build. See, my yard slopes from one corner down to the other corner of the pool, so I needed retaining walls at both the front of the pool and the back of the pool. On top of that, the sandy soil made it impossible to get pump trucks in for the concrete. In fact, the job was so complex that one of the top decking companies in my area flat turned it down. Eventually, I found a newer company willing to take it on. A company called Texas Pavers and Patios. The process wasn't without hiccups, but they did eventually get it done. Between the retaining walls, the travertine pavers around the pool, and the pavilion, and a 10 by 20 equipment pad, the total cost came to $56,000. Now, I had other quotes at $36,000, but I added travertine. The $36,000 quote was just for concrete. Adding the travertine, the entire deck, was in another $20,000. Now, let's compare that to the pool company. They quoted me for a brushed concrete deck $18,733, but they wanted another $9,193 for the back retaining wall. And then they wanted another $2,340 to finish the plumbing and run it to an equipment pad that was going to cost me another $3,120. On top of that, for the pavilion area, they wanted another $5,620, and then for some reason added some kind of handrail in there for $643. So that brought their total to $39,649. And that's not including travertine, that's just concrete. Now, the general contractor's numbers were different, but still limiting. He quoted $18,315 for a concrete deck, and then another $2,900 for the equipment pad, and $5,400 for what I can only imagine is a textured finish of some sort of grandeur process. So his total was $26,615. But again, concrete, not travertine. Huge difference. So here's the trade off. By managing the process myself through DIY pools, I got a travertine paver, custom retaining walls, and a beautiful resort looking deck. Yes, it did cost more. This part I took a hit on, $56,000. But I got the materials, the layout, the functionality that I wanted instead of being boxed in to just brushed concrete. Okay, so next up was the electrical, gas, and the equipment on the equipment pad. Basically, how I brought electrical power and gas to the pad and the equipment that I installed on the pad to run the pool. So for my build, I did most of the electrical work myself, carefully following all codes. I had originally been quoted around $5,500 just to hook it all up. But instead I ran a 250-foot power line from the main panel to the sub panel on my own. At the pad, I installed an emergency cutoff switch and used the Hayward Omni controller as the sub panel since it had one built in already. So I'll have a video of this breaking down that project much later. But here's what I spent. I paid $1,000 to have a guy come in and have the electrical wire, the trench dug and the direct bury wire put in there. The wire itself cost me $928.20. The direct bury wire, it's fully in code. And then it was $269 for the safety cutoff switch with the fuse included. I reused leftover conduit from the plumbing phase of my build, so there's no cost there. And then on the gas side, I installed a 250-gallon underground propane tank for $4,300. For equipment, I sourced everything myself using my own contractor account. I have 2 pumps, a filter, a 500 BTU heater, 6 LED lights, 2 bubblers, transformer, and the Hayward Omni controller. with a salt chlorinator. This full list came to $11,529. I also added a custom cover over the equipment pad, kind of one of those VersaTube covers, for $2,227. Now, if you are in the DIY pools and spa program, you can get all of this equipment at their cost, dropped to your place, totally wholesale. It's a really good deal. I just went a different route because I wanted to be able to, well, I thought I needed to return it there. In the end, you do not need to do that. Go with the DIY pools. It's much easier. Um, all in for electrical, gas, and equipment, it came to $20,253.20. So we'll just round it off at $20,253. Now let's compare that to the pool company. The pool company quoted $20,297 for the equipment alone. And it wasn't even the same setup. It didn't have bubblers, it just had one light. On top of that, they wanted $3,900 to hook up the equipment, $2,860 for associated electrical materials, whatever that means, $5,558 for the electric line, and $650 for the extra sub panel that I don't even need. Their total was $33,265 for electrical, and the hookup did not include the propane tank. The general contractor came in a little lower, but still higher than my cost. He quoted $17,739 for the comparable Pentair equipment, $5,600 for the propane tank, but it wasn't going to be buried, it was going to be sitting above ground, and $650 for a sub panel. His total was $23,989. So by sourcing and installing much of the equipment myself, the total came to $20,253.20 compared to $33,265 from the pool company and $23,989 from the general contractor. I think I did pretty good. All right, so now we're on to plaster and startup. This is kind of the final stage. You get to see your pool come to life, put water in it. It's a great time. So for our pool, we chose for our plaster MPT Stonescapes Mini Pebble Aqua White, but we upgraded it with a additive called the Puerto Rican blend. It's a mix of glass beads that's added to the plaster near the end of the process. It makes it just shimmer and sparkle in the sunlight. It's really neat. I mean, honestly, I wasn't a believer until I actually saw it in person, and it is awesome. So for installation, we hired John Aguirre, owner of Aguirre Custom Masonry. His crew does plaster work for some of the biggest pool builders in town, so we knew we were in pretty good hands. They came in, they knocked out the job in under a day and came back the next day for the acid wash. But here's where he really stood out. John didn't just do the job and leave. He spent a lot of time talking with me about the startup process. You know, since we're on well water, getting that chemistry balance can be tricky. However, with his guidance and a lot of YouTube research on my end, I was able to get the startup dialed in right. And yes, I documented everything for future reference in case we have some warranty issues. Now, let's talk cost. So for doing it the DIY route with John Aguirre and his company, they charged us $13,690, and that included the startup advice that he and consultation that he provided. He even came back later and check out the pool and make sure everything was going okay. The so-called custom pool builder, they wanted to charge me $17,550 for Quartzscape, plus a $2,000 two-color added up charge. And then for their startup, they wanted to charge me another $1,950. So that's a total of $21,500. And then the general contractor, he also charged roughly the same $19,550 for a two-color Quartzscape. And then his startup fee was $2,100 for a total of $21,650. So by, again, DIY, you know, I hired the contractor directly. I got the exact finish I wanted, and I saved nearly $8,000 compared to the others, either going through a custom pool builder or a general contractor. Okay, so let's wrap this up by talking about the pavilion and some other associated costs I had included in the earlier sections. For me, I went ahead and built the pavilion myself. I had quoted out a cedar pavilion by a couple of companies, and they wanted it around $26,000. Instead, I bought the materials myself, designed it, designed the build in a program called SketchUp, and for about 4 weekends, I built what I think is a pretty awesome pavilion. I think it came out really great. There are some other associated costs or additions that I'm not including in the cost comparison because they weren't in the other two bids. Things like landscaping, outdoor furniture, umbrellas, the fence. I mean, I do plan on doing a fence video later. It was a huge project, but I think it came out really great. And I also had to spend about $500 in startup chemicals. I didn't include that earlier. I probably should have. But altogether, across every phase of the build, I spent $162,780.50, and that's for the pool, the equipment pad, and the pavilion, the deck, everything you see in the photos except for the furniture and landscaping and the fence. So now let's compare that from the quotes from the pool builder and the contractor. So the traditional pool builder had a couple extra fees in there that he kind of snuck in. One of them was a cleanup fee. I don't know what that's for. $4,875. Every single one of my subcontractors cleaned the site as they had found it, so that's kind of weird. There was a line item in there for extras. That's all it said, and that was $1,950 of extras. There was a beverage ledge. I don't even know what that is, but it was in there. It's $975. The pavilion that they wanted to build, vaulted ceilings, two outlets, two fan hookups, and stone pillars, was about $25,000. So that's pretty comparable to what I was getting from some builders that I had quoted. Um, the general contractor, let's take a look at what he had. He didn't have any hidden fees, so that's kind of nice. Nothing saying hidden or extra or cleanup, nothing like that. He did add the pavilion in there. He was going to do it with vaulted ceilings, two outlets, two fan hookups, and stone pillars, and he had it a little bit less. For $22,000, you could have gotten that done. The total for the entire project from the pool builder was $245,762.67. Much, much more than I paid to build my pool. The general contractor put in the pavilion with the vaulted ceilings, the two outlets, two fans. They weren't just hookups; they were actually going to have the two fans in there and stone pillars around the edge. $22,000. Had no extra hidden fees. Had no extra fees. No hidden things in there. No cleanup. No nothing. Just that. And his total for the entire project was $222,289,000. Yeah, so 222,289. No, let me try that again. $222,289. So, by managing the project myself, hiring all the trades directly, I saved over $80,000 compared to the traditional pool builder. But if you add in the travertine cost and do the same deck, remember those two guys, those two bids, they were going to do just concrete. So if you add the $20,000 surcharge for the travertine, you can see I saved well over $100,000 building this pool through DIY Pools and Build. So I think I got exactly what I wanted from the pool finish to the pool design. Everything was done the way we wanted it done. Nobody forced us to cut corners. In fact, the travertine is probably a good example of where we actually spent more than we probably should have. But I think we got a great deal. Love to hear if you've experienced the same, or if you have any questions, or if you think maybe we're just blowing smoke. Put a comment down below, and I'd love to have a discussion with you. Okay, until next time, like, subscribe, please. And if you have any ideas or suggestions you want me to do videos on, yeah, go ahead and put a comment down below about that as well. Take care.